Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Whitaker, and I'm back today to do the last video in this series on the Dr. Steve Hassan's B.I.T.E model. And if you've been following along for the last several videos, hopefully you've gone through each little bite-sized chunk of the B.I.T.E model. I guess pun not intended, but it works. Also, I'm going to refer back to the destructive cult structure today and the influence continuum. And I'm going to give an example of a past experience I had, because I haven't always been a trauma specialist. I've had, a couple different careers before this one. And a previous career, I was a body worker for over a decade. And I went to a lot of different continuing education classes. And there were a handful of modalities that worked really well for me. Well, one of those modalities that I specialized in turned out to be kind of culty. And I didn't realize it until I'd been in the group for maybe 5 or 6 years, whenever I started to realize that something wasn't right. And when I realized it was when I was no longer a fringe member, I was a rank and file member, and I was just about to become this core devotee. So I was slowly working my way up the pyramid. And when it comes to our work, isn't that what we strive for, to work our way up? So I wanted what anyone else would want. And then things started to happen, and I started to realize something is really off about this. So I'm going to take you through some of my experiences so you can see how to apply the B.I.T.E model. And what's really important as you go through the B.I.T.E model, whatever you're applying it to in your life, number one, start with only one relationship. Is that relationship a relationship that you have with a partner? Maybe a parent, a child. It could be a relationship with one other person, or it could be a relationship with a group. It could be your relationship with your yoga studio down the street. It could be your relationship with the people that you work with, because there are some just basic work environments that end up on the destructive end of the influence continuum. So only look at one relationship at a time whenever you go through this. That's super important. And the other thing that's important to remember is you're not looking at beliefs. Look at behavior, not belief. Because if you want to argue beliefs, we can argue about beliefs for infinity, because belief is at the root of how many wars that we've had throughout the history of humankind. So I'm not talking about beliefs, I'm talking about behaviors today. So keep that in mind as we apply the B.I.T.E model to a very specific situation, so you can see how this process works. Well, I want to take a moment before I really dive into this to welcome you to my channel, or welcome you back to my channel if you've been here before. It's great to see you again. If you're finding value in my videos, please like, share, subscribe, and be sure to hit that bell on YouTube so you don't miss any videos. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and jump in. And I'm going to assess what I believe is a cult of personality. And a cult of personality has one figure or one person at the head of it. And with this particular cult of personality, they had developed this method of body work. And so it revolved around a very specific methodology or a very specific approach. And you'll see this a lot of times in like guru cults or self-help cults or therapy cults, LGATs, large group awareness trainings, where there's one person at the head of it and it revolves around a very specific modality. You might see it in sports where it revolves around like a type of karate or kung fu or CrossFit or yoga or something like that. And this was just in a different industry. And if you want to follow along, feel free to go to Dr. Stephen Hassan's website, which is freedomofmind.com, and follow along with the B.I.T.E model. So I'm going to jump in with behavior control. So because this group is still very much up and active, it's not like Nexium or anything where they've been taken down. I'm changing the names, and I'm not actually naming the group publicly to, protect the people who are still in it. And I've changed the name of the founder of the group. I'm going to refer to him as Ray, which is not his real name, but that's what I'm going to call him today. So under behavior control, did they regulate the individual's physical reality? Not so much. Was there any dictating of where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates? In my experience, no. There were treatment centers in different parts of the country. And so for people who worked their way up the pyramid and were hired at a treatment center, a lot of them did move. Now, what was their experience when they moved? I don't know. I never really got into those conversations. But there were rumors because gossip was big in this community. So I'm pointing this out because it's not outside the realm of possibility that some people did have their lives dictated once they moved and isolated to work at a treatment center, but I can't say that for sure. When, how, and with whom the member has sex. I don't think there was any, control over that type of behavior. I do know there were rumors, and I had one experience myself where it's kind of a weird thing, like I went to a vacation destination to take a series of classes, and I went shopping. I bought this cool sweater, and it was made out of this fabric that I'd never come across before. And it was really super soft. And I know at one point Ray was talking to me, and, like he was kind of rubbing his hand on my sweater, but it was in a place that was a little bit inappropriate where he was touching me. And that made me just kind of get that little wonky, like, ooh, wait a minute, what's this? And then I've heard rumors that Ray had made passes at women within the community. And when I say rumors, a couple women mentioned it to me, but I'm saying this because it's not outside the realm of possibility. Just because it didn't happen to me doesn't mean it didn't happen to somebody else. And gossip was a big thing. You're going to hear me talk about the gossip circuit within this community a lot today. Was there any control of clothing or hairstyles? No, not that I experienced. There was no regulation of diet and food, hunger, or fasting that I ever experienced or heard about or witnessed. I never experienced, heard about, or witnessed deprivation of sleep or manipulation of sleep. Financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. Oh yes, this was a big one, because Ray loved to encourage people to take classes over and over and over again. So if you would repeat classes, you could take them for half price, which sounds great on the surface, but it became this competition within the community where you would sit down at a class and somebody might come up to you and, introduce themselves and say, oh, I've never seen you before. Is this your first time here? Oh, this is my 5th time taking this class. Or, this is my 4th time. Or, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be taking this class again and repeating it. So there was this whole illusion around you have to take the classes multiple times or you don't really get it. So yes, there was this financial dependence that was created upon the organization, which had us dumping money over and over back into his organization. Was there any restriction of leisure, entertainment, or vacation time? Now, where this one really stands out to me was, if you remember the 2016 presidential election, yes, it was contentious, and a lot of people had a lot of feelings, and the feelings were all over the place on both sides of the aisle. And at one point, Ray came out and issued a statement to everybody who had taken classes and was part of the community that he no longer wanted to see people within his community putting political posts on their personal pages and social media, because if they did, he was going to ban them from the groups, like the social media groups where we could keep in touch with other people within the community and stay close to the work. And that is something that didn't feel good to me when that statement came out. I didn't think it was fair to try to dictate to people, because there were people who were heavily involved in politics that were in the community, and he was trying to dictate to them what they could and couldn't put on their Facebook pages or Instagram or other social media pages. And that was when I decided something is really skeevy, something's really off, I've got to get out of this group. And I started to distance myself from the group at that point. So yes, there was definitely some restriction. It wasn't across the board. It was in very specific areas. Was there major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet? So yes, this did happen because we were strongly encouraged to participate in the social media groups that were associated with this organization. And prior to the social media groups, there were email forums. And it was a lot to keep up with, because a lot of people were posting a lot of comments every single day, and just it took so much time to go through that. Was there permission required for major decisions? That didn't happen to me. I can't say if that would have happened to any of the top leaders, or the sub leaders. I don't know. Rewards and punishments were used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. There was a little bit of this going on, with rewards and punishment used to modify behaviors. And it came through, from what I witnessed, and what I experienced, it came through the classes. Like if you were somebody that Ray favored and Ray liked, he would handle your question and answer your question very, very differently than he would somebody that he didn't like or didn't really favor within the community. And there was often a difference in how Ray would respond to women who would ask a question versus men who would ask a question. Ray was a little bit flirty, so he would tend to flirt with the women and kind of be rude to the men. And that's an overgeneralization. And also it was palpable. Was there a discouragement of individualism and an encouragement of groupthink? Yes, absolutely. Ray had these little cliche sayings of, they were called rayings, within the group, and everybody knew, oh yeah, that's a raying, that's a raying. He says this. And there was the gossip circuit and the peer pressure to conform, for sure. Was there an imposition of rigid rules and regulations? Rigid, no, I wouldn't say rigid, because there was some freedom and flexibility, for sure. Was there any punishment of disobedience by beating, torture, burning, cutting, rape, tattooing, branding? No. I never saw anything like that. Never heard any rumors of anything even close to that. So no. I never heard of threats to harm of family or friends. I never heard of anything, zero evidence of forcing an individual to, have sex or, get into any illegal sexual activity. I didn't hear, I don't think there was any encouragement or engagement in corporal punishment. There was instilling dependency and obedience, that came through just with the peer pressure to conform. No kidnapping, no beating, no torture, nothing like that. No separation of families, no imprisonment, no murder. So most of what's in behavior control, it's just kind of meh. So if you only look at the B and you go back to the influence continuum for organizations, it's still kind of over here. Like there are a couple things that are a little bit, but it's not that bad so far. But let's go on to the I. Let's look at the information control. So with information control, was there deception? Were they deliberately withholding information? I don't know if there was any deliberate withholding of information. I do know there was deliberate manipulation of information, which is B under information control, 1B. There was distorting information to make it more acceptable and more palatable. And I don't know that there was any systemic lying to the group members. But that distortion to make it more acceptable, and just like the rayings, the sayings that Ray would make. A lot of times that was a distortion of complex information and kind of whittling it down to, which we'll talk about a little bit later, whittling it down to a cliche to make it more palatable. Was there any minimizing or discouraging access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazine? Yes, this did happen to some degree. Any information that would challenge or disagree with Ray's belief system, oh yes, that was discouraged. Absolutely. If somebody challenged Ray during a class by asking a question or raising their hand and saying, oh, wait a minute, based on my experience or my knowledge, that's not true, then there would be the tone, the whole tone of the room would change. And Ray had a lot of flying monkeys in the community. So here, I can give you an example. There were some modalities, bodywork modalities, that Ray just was not on board with at all. He would talk down about certain other modalities. And there was one gentleman who had a thriving practice, and he was hiring someone, and he spoke at a class saying, hey, if anyone's interested in working with me, this is where I live. If you live close to where I do and you're interested in being hired, come see me or email me or let's talk. And he was talking about his practice, and he had a practitioner who specialized in a particular modality that Ray was always talking shit about. And as soon as he said, I've got this one practitioner who's an expert in this modality, there was an audible gasp from the people who were in the class going, oh, like you could just hear the people clutching their pearls. Like, how dare this guy hire somebody who is an expert in a modality that Ray does not approve of? So yes, there was absolutely discouraging access to non-cult sources of information, and trying to distort information, and trying to skew our beliefs in favor of what Ray thinks and out of favor of what anyone else would think. Let's see. Did they discourage our access to critical information? Former members. The former members was a big one, because there were several former members who had been shunned and excommunicated, and that was part of the gossip circuit within the community. So people who were former members, especially if they were top leaders. Now, former members were fringe or rank and file. So what? Nobody really cared. But especially if the former members had been up here in the destructive cult structure, then yes, we weren't supposed to communicate with them. Ray had a couple former partners that were, former business partners / intimate partners. And if we were caught fraternizing or talking to one of them, oh my goodness, then we would be shunned and excommunicated, and that would get the pearl clutching audible gasps like, oh, I can't believe you talked to that person. That's awful. So yes, there was always the threat of being cast out of the village. Did they keep members busy so they didn't have time to think and investigate? Not so much, maybe a little bit of that with just the pressure to be involved with the online forums and online groups. That did take up a lot of time. So maybe a little touch of it. But if we didn't engage, there was no backlash or punishment. We would just be kind of out of the loop. There was no control through cell phone texting, calls, or internet tracking, nothing like that. Was there compartmentalizing information into outsider versus insider doctrines to ensure that information is not freely accessible? Were they controlling information at different levels and missions within the group, and only allowing leadership to decide who needs to know what and when? Now, again, I didn't experience this level of information control. Now, there was a little bit of us versus them, insider versus outsider, and that had a lot to do with specific outsiders. So, for example, one of Ray's former business partners had gone on to create his own series of classes. And for years and years, this has gone on for decades, actually, Ray will belittle this gentleman. And at one point, when Ray was getting ready to teach a class, he had one of his assistant instructors take a picture of the classroom before all the students came in. So it was just a room full of empty chairs with the stage all set up. And it was posted in our little group on social media at the time as if it were this ex-business partner's class, going, LOL, look how empty the room is. This is how many people show up to his classes. And it was really pretty rude. And they had been separated and not business partners and for well over a decade at this point. I mean, it had been years and years. And the fact that Ray couldn't let it go and is still getting his digs in years and years later, yeah, that's pretty skeevy. Let's see, where am I? 4, under information control, encouraging spying on other members. Like imposing there was no buddy system to monitor and control other members. We didn't have that. There was no doctrine that dictated that we had to report deviant thoughts and feelings and actions to leadership. However, individual behavior was monitored by the group through the gossip circuit. Oh, guess what she did, or guess what he did, or da, 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 da. And also, Ray was addicted, I think, to social media. And so Ray would troll our personal pages on social media, and we knew it. When there were times in class, if he wasn't the one on stage teaching, or if he was sitting in the back of the room at the instructor's table, we could see him scrolling through his phone. He was on social media, and we all knew it. Let's see. Or 5 on information control, extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, and then misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. So B was a much bigger issue than A was. So A, yeah, there was definitely the social media trolling and keeping tabs on people through social media trolling. But B, taking information out of context. So when I went on to become a trauma specialist, I started by taking classes in somatic experiencing. Somatic experiencing is a modality that was created by Dr. Peter Levine. And when I got into the somatic experiencing classes, I could see evidence of this all over the place. I could see where Ray had taken little tiny quotes or little chunks of information from Peter Levine's work, and he would distort the information, take it out of context, and apply it to his modality. And but it wasn't until I got into the program, and I was like really far into the program, when I really started to see how Ray had done this and how he had used these non-cult sources of information or non-Ray sources of information in order to, like misquote, take things out of context and manipulate us. Was there any unethical use of confession? So information about sins used to disrupt or dissolve identity boundaries, withholding forgiveness or absolution, or manipulation of memory or possible false memories. Now, the withholding of forgiveness or absolution, that goes hand in hand with, like some of the treatment of ex-members, especially the higher ups, that for years and years and years are dealing with, like Ray's comments at them and the shunning and the excommunication. That just never seems to stop within this group. So that brings us to the end of I, information control. And so again, if we go back to the influence continuum for organizations, yeah, we're a little bit more into this muddy middle now, where things aren't, they're just like, this isn't looking so good. Because the way it happened was a little less obvious and a little more insidious. And this group does fall into the muddy middle for sure. So let's pop down to thought control. Was there any requirement of members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, adopting the group's map of reality as reality? and instilling black and white thinking, deciding between good and evil, or organizing people into us versus them or insiders versus outsiders. So yes, absolutely. So as with any group, there are going to be members who are ambitious and who want to go off and start their own classes and do their own thing. And that's what so many people in life do. But so many folks who went through Ray's classes and then went on to take other things that they've learned and put them together and create their own classes, were often belittled or talked down about by Ray. He would call people who had gone through through his classes and then creating their own as copycats. And he would say their information is all watered down and you don't want to go to the copycats because you're not getting the real thing. And I really bought into that for a while. And I look back on it and I'm like, wow, dang, they had me sucked in for sure. And it did create this black and white thinking. If it didn't come directly from Ray and directly from Ray's classes, then it was somehow not legitimate. And it wasn't worthy of learning. And for a couple years, I was definitely in that mindset. I was pretty sucked in. And organizing people into us versus them. Again, Ray would do that with the gossip circuits and with his rayings or the little sayings. We always called them rayings, which are little cliches, which I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes. Was there manipulation of memory? I'll talk about that in a minute too. Let's go on to changing a person's name and identity. No, there wasn't that. I didn't see anything like that. Was there use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords? Yes, absolutely. And that's what the rayings or Ray's sayings were meant to do. And there was even one member of the community who made a little card deck. It was almost like like you pull a card, like an oracle card or tarot cards or something, but each card had a different raying on it. And I got to be honest, I threw mine away. I had a deck and I threw it away and went in the trash. And I was happy to see it drop into the trash. But now that I look back, I kind of wish I still had it because it would be fun to pull one of them out and to see what some of those rayings are. I've forgotten a lot of them. But yes, they definitely took complex truths and whittled them down into a platitude or a buzzword or, this is all you got to do, just whittle it down to this and there you go. And it made it also discouraged critical thinking because it took the complexity and whittled it down to something really simple. And that's not how the world works, actually. Was there encouragement of only good and proper thoughts? I wouldn't say good and proper thoughts, but there was a little bit of pressure to be toxically positive, like, oh, just only good thoughts, no negative emotions, love and light only. So yeah, that type of bypassing with the toxic positivity, there was a little bit of pressure for that, but it wasn't the main part of what was happening within the group. Now, hypnotic techniques are used to alter mental states, undermine critical thinking, and even to age regress the member. So yes, there were hypnotic techniques that were used within Ray's classes. He would often do guided meditations. He would turn down the lights. He would use specific types of music to manipulate our emotions and our feelings. And using specific types of lighting and music, that is something that happens a lot in LGAT trainings. LGAT stands for Large Group Awareness Trainings. And a big one is, you can see evidence of this in the Netflix, I think it's on Netflix, the show called I'm Not Your Guru, which shows Tony Robbins' organization. Tony Robbins and others like him, not just him, are notorious for using music and, just like really pumping up the atmosphere. So you walk away with the experience that he wants you to have. There was a little bit of that would happen within this group, with the guided meditations, and Ray's guided meditations were very hypnotic. Were memories manipulated and false memories created? That didn't happen to me. The hypnotic techniques, didn't necessarily mess with our memories that I'm aware of. And if I've not been able to put it together, if it happened with me, I don't think it did. Did they teach thought stopping techniques, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts? Yes, that did happen. And the rayings were one way that we would do that. And also, as you worked your way up the classes, there was this whole technique, like uncoiling technique. You want to uncoil that out of your body, like get that out of your system. And that can include any of the following, the denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking, chanting, meditating, praying, speaking in tongues, singing or humming. There were elements of all of that within this organization and within the classes and how things were taught. Was there rejection of rational analysis, rejection of critical thinking, and rejection of constructive criticism? Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You didn't want to question Ray. You didn't want to challenge him. You didn't want to criticize him, because if you did, you were going to be humiliated in front of the class and very possibly kicked out. I do know a couple people personally who were kicked out of classes, who were turned away. I have one friend who ended up in this contentious back and forth with Ray, and this individual traveled across the country and showed up at a class, and at the door, this individual was turned away and not permitted into the class. This person was basically said they could not take classes anymore. But instead of Ray having somebody reach out to this individual before they spent money on travel, let them spend money on hotels, airfare, rental cars, and turn them away at the door, which is a pretty shitty thing to do to somebody. Let's see, did they forbid critical questions about the leader, the doctrine, or the policy allowed? Yes, we weren't supposed to criticize Ray at all. We weren't supposed to criticize the technique, and so labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. The copycats, the watered down, alternative beliefs that are copycatted or watered down. So it wasn't necessarily called evil or, illegitimate, but copycat and watered down. Yeah, that has a little bit of a stigma to it. And was there instilling a new map of reality? To some degree, yes, because the new map of reality was Ray's paradigm, and we all had to, fall within Ray's paradigm. And if we didn't, then we were all conditioned to go back to the Rayings or, Ray's sayings to keep us within Ray's paradigm. So now that takes us to the end of thought control. So when you look at thought control, again, for organizations, we're kind of over here in that muddy middle where it's a little bit destructive, where there's this a little bit of, trying to clone people. Like we want everybody to conform. There was pressure to conform, and there's no good reason to leave, because if you leave, you're going to be shunned or excommunicated. And the Rayings helped Ray preserve his own power. And so, we're leaning more toward the destructive end. Now, let's do the last one, emotional control. Emotional control is about, the first one says manipulate and narrow the range of feelings, some emotion, and or the needs that are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. And so, yes, there was a little bit of narrowing the range of feelings. Again, the emphasis on the toxic positivity and the love and light only is how they would narrow the range of feelings that we were allowed to display. The Rayings were both thought stopping and emotion stopping techniques. So if you started to feel a negative emotion, then you just start repeating a Raying, and you go back to the rationalization that, oh, okay, I can just choose differently. I don't have to feel this way. And, so it was always on us. It was always all our fault if we weren't always happy and positive all the time. Let's see. Did they make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leaders or the group's fault? Well, I guess I covered that one a little early, because yes, there was. if we weren't successful at it, then it was all our fault. Did they promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as identity guilt? You're not living up to your potential. B was a big one. You're not living up to your potential. But there was a lot of talk about, what we were capable of and what our potential was. And Ray would even get on stage at classes and talk about, if you just stick with this technique and you get really good at it and you work your way through all the classes and you keep repeating the classes, people are going to keep coming to you and you're going to make money beyond your wildest dreams. And now I look back, I can see how he was making money beyond his wildest dreams, but most of us never did, because we weren't trying to manipulate other people the way he was manipulating us. Did they try to make us believe our family is deficient? Now, this is something else that I thought about this one for a long time. And Ray would talk about in classes, especially in beginning classes. Yeah, I remember him mentioning on different occasions that people start to take his classes. And he said, a lot of times people start to discover who they are. They get in touch with their authentic self and they're more autonomous. And next thing you know, they're going through breakups or getting a divorce and they're moving on and flourishing in their life because they realize they're in these horrible relationships. So there's a little bit of that happening. He didn't force anyone to get divorced and he didn't force anyone to break up, but he was planting those little seeds like, oh, you're going to start taking my classes. And as you take my classes, you're going to start to change. And as you start to change, the people in your life are not going to like it. And it might get to the point where you end up, separating and splitting ways. So yeah, there was a little bit of that happening. Let's see. Did they try to make us think our past was suspect? No, I don't remember that. That your affiliations are unwise. Yeah, there was definitely some of that, especially if we wanted to fraternize with any of Ray's ex-partners, whether they were business partners, intimate partners, and sometimes the intimate and business partners were one and the same person. And some of his ex-partners had gone on to create their own classes, which is a big no-no, watered down, don't talk to them. And I took several classes from some of his ex-partners, which made me, kind of the shunned, excommunicated, and if anybody fraternized with him, you had to keep it on the down low. It was hush hush, like, shh, don't tell Ray, don't let anybody know. And the higher up you are in the community, the more dangerous it becomes to communicate with Ray's enemies and ex-business partners. Let's see, your thoughts, feelings, and actions are irrelevant or selfish. There was a little bit of that going on too, because you had to fall within Ray's paradigm. And if you didn't fall within Ray's paradigm, that wasn't okay. I don't remember any social guilt or historical guilt. Number 5 under emotion control, instilling fear, such as fear of thinking independently. Yeah, there was, I don't want to say it was instilling fear. Well, but yeah, I guess it was because the fear was, if I do this, am I going to be excommunicated? If I do that. So there was a lot of walking on eggshells. So there was fear of the outside world, fear of enemies. Yes, definitely. And it wasn't, and it was very specifically Ray's enemies or the people he perceived as enemies. No, there was nothing about losing one's salvation because this didn't really have a religious or, it wasn't a religious group or anything. Leaving or being shunned by the group. Yes, that was a big fear of a lot of people. And it happened to several people that I know, and several people that came before me and several people after me. And whenever you were shunned by Ray, then you had everyone else's disapproval as well. And again, I don't remember historical guilt. Extremes of emotional highs and lows, like the love bombing and praise one moment, then declaring you are horrible the next moment. That happened to me. And I still don't know what the hell happened, to be honest. Like I said, I was a rank and file member and I was ambitious. I was like working my way up, or I thought I was. And so I had gone through the classes and I'd worked my way up to a certain level within the organization. And I became a program assistant, which is, assisting with classes. And I felt so excited that I got to assist at the classes because I'm like, wow, maybe I'll get to eventually one day help teach the classes. That would be awesome. And as a program assistant, I started to see things that I didn't really like within the organization. And I became a program assistant, like a couple years before the election. So I started to see, how the sausage was made, so to speak. And I was assisting at a class. I had a lot of friends within the community. There was another class on the exact same weekend, about 5 hours from where my class was. And one of my good friends was a program assistant in that class. And in the boxes that they received, there was some information missing. So my friend, who was a program assistant in the other class, texted me and said, hey, we didn't get this piece of paper that comes with every class that we have. Can you please take a picture of the address and send it to me on that piece of paper? We really need that address. And so I did. I took a piece of paper, I texted her back and I responded and she said she got it. And, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And it was really quick. But the instructor for my class, it was not Ray, it was somebody else. It was another instructor. The person who was instructing the class that I was assisting at yelled at me because I responded to their text message. And there was like 0 exceptions. It didn't matter that they were having an issue and I was helping out. Nobody even saw me texting. It was just an opportunity for her to stand on a platform and put somebody down, which she did quite often when she taught classes. So again, not helpful, not willing to listen to what was really going on. She didn't ask me like, what happened, what was going on, why were you texting? We don't want our program assistants to text because then the students will start texting and so on and so forth. No exceptions. That's pretty skeevy. Let me see, where am I? I could give several more examples of, like the praise one moment, and then that happened often. Was there ritualistic and sometimes public confession of sins? No, I don't remember anything like that. Phobia indoctrination, including irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. Yes, there were absolutely irrational fears about leaving the group, and there were absolutely irrational fears about questioning the leader's authority. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside the group. Yeah, that narrative was happening a bit. Would there be terrible consequences if you leave? Nothing like hell or demonic possession or anything like that. It was just the fear of being shunned, the shunning of those who leave and being rejected and losing our group of friends. And, because there were a lot of wonderful things that came out of this community. And that's the hard part about some of these destructive organizations is nobody joins a cult. People join a cause. People join a good thing. They join something where I can do something good with my life. I can contribute. I can give back. I can help change the world. And then it goes sideways. And never having a legitimate reason to leave. Like, why would you leave? Because if you just stick with this technique, you'll make money beyond your wildest dreams. But there were no threats of harm to ex-members and family. I don't remember anything like that. So again, if we come back to, now that we've gone through the entire B.I.T.E model, if we can come back to the influence continuum, I would put this group somewhere, kind of in this yellow turning to gold, right about here in the destructive area. So it was kind of in that muddy middle, definitely leaning toward a destructive group, even though the group that I was involved with lacked a lot of the different elements on the B.I.T.E model. So hopefully putting it all together and walking you through the process. And please note that, like I said at the beginning, I looked at the behavior of the group. I didn't talk about any of the beliefs. I didn't even mention the rayings or anything like that. I talked about them, but I didn't mention any of them specifically because there's a lot of beliefs involved in the rayings. And because it doesn't do any good to argue beliefs. So look at one group, one affiliation, one relationship at a time, and look at the behavior, not the beliefs. That's how you apply this information. And so I'm curious, did this help? Do you have a relationship that you want to apply this to? If you're confused about that, or if you want a little bit of help, feel free to reach out. I can help you go through the B.I.T.E model and apply it to your situation if you want me to. That's always an option. Just reach out to me and we can schedule a session and I can help you do that. Or if this opened your eyes and you're able to apply the B.I.T.E model to a situation, what did you learn about your situation? Are you somewhere in the muddy middle? Is it a destructive situation? Or did you finally uncover that it's a healthy situation? So feel free to let me know what's your experience. What did you learn? Yeah, and let me know. All right, everyone, I hope you have found this information valuable. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and again, be sure to hit that bell on YouTube so you don't miss anything. All right, everyone, I will see you next time. Happy self-discovery.